Welcome to this talk by our local hero, Martin, from Hamburg. Maybe one of the most famous designers in Hamburg, probably. And I'm very excited to hear your talk right now. And yeah, well, as people are coming in, maybe just 5 seconds of talking, and then grab a seat over there. Way more seats. You can still take them, and yeah, have fun and enjoy.
Thanks. Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I guess I stay with the English as there hopefully are some international people in the room. I'm capable of speaking German since, as Michael said, I'm from Hamburg. We work and live in Hamburg here. Yeah, but I want to start off by talking a little bit about what I've been doing so far, where I'm from, just a short introduction. Studied communication design in Würzburg, went to San Francisco afterwards to work with Method, a design studio there mainly focused on UI UX design. This is where I got the first brief touch of UI UX, and moved back to Hamburg afterwards and started working here with Mutabor, which is a more traditional design industry company. And but after a year, already decided that I want to start my own thing and want to move more towards UI UX design and information design. And so I started my own company, Büro Oberhäuser, very creative name, in 2011. Also did some teaching in between and at the FH Münster, had an interim professorship there. But I stopped doing that because it was hard to combine it with running an agency and also doing the teaching. So now I work full-time here in this office, just 5 minutes away from here, if you take a bike, one train stop away in the Schanzeviertel. People from Hamburg might know us. You might end up there tonight because a lot of bars there and so on, after the party maybe. Yes, and I want to show you a little bit what we used to do, where we kind of like started off. And that was mainly traditional infographics. So we did a lot of data visualization on a print basis. Those were works for a big encyclopedia, Brockhaus. Those were like satellites close and comets close to the Earth, the highest mountains, and you could see like very visual things, all on a print basis. Did that for a long time. Very rarely do that now. We mainly work on UI UX design and work for a variety of clients there. Some of them like big enterprises like Volkswagen, they're in the upper right. Also some of the big Silicon Valley companies like Facebook or Airbnb that we work with. But we mainly have our focus on working with like mid-sized startups, because this gives us the opportunity to really work on digital products and have an important part of developing those products. But I'll talk about this a little more later. I want to talk to you by starting it up, talk about the importance of information design. And not that long ago, there was actually not that many information surrounding us at all. It was just the main basic media were like newspapers, magazines, and television. And therefore, the information that was available was not that much. It was just hard to find. Nowadays, it's kind of like we have the opposite problem. There's too much information surrounding us. It's thanks to the internet, of course, and specifically to the mobile internet. Nowadays, every information you can imagine is like a fingertip away. And this is great, but it also gives us the problem that there's so much information that it's hard to find the information that is most relevant for me. And this is where design comes into play as a filter and help me and help the user to guide through this jungle of information and help me find the information that is most relevant for me. So that also means, like, when you as a designer, or me as a designer, look at information, look at data that I want to communicate, I can't just take the data one-to-one and transfer it into a meaningless information graphic and don't add any additional value. That's just not the way information design should work. It's actually important that you become an author and kind of take responsibility for the topics you're talking about, and to help you to understand it first. Meaning you have to become an expert, otherwise you won't be able to communicate it back to others. If you don't understand the information, the topic you're talking about, how should you be able to communicate that back? And that means doing like a little bit of the annoying stuff first, like dive into those Excel sheets or whatever information you kind of have and dive really deep and find the information that might be relevant, and then analyze it, interpret it, and somehow find relations, and then find a unique visual way to present it in a new and unique way and highlight your findings, and therefore ultimately add this additional informational value to the user or the viewer that's looking at it. I want to show a short example to let you help that understand better. This is storage media over the times of the last few years, starting with like tiny 8-inch disc with 1.2 megabyte of storage, going up to its USB sticks. They're by now even bigger, but you get the idea. Like looking at a USB stick, if this is the bar representing the 265 gigabyte, a CD with 900 megabyte is like tiny down here. So you see it will be hard with this representation to show the disks up there. So therefore you kind of have to find other visual ways to represent that. And this is just a short, simple example showing you how huge this USB stick is. You just see it cropped barely and you see the curve, but you could picture how huge it actually would be compared to the CD. And the even tinier disks that are now even 10 times blown up. Otherwise, they wouldn't be visible at all. And I still like to show this as an example. This is my diploma thesis from back in the days, 2009, I think. Yeah. And I was dealing with the 10 largest German cities and trying to compare them statistically as good as possible, trying to gather as much information I could find for those cities, and put them in different categories like the public transportation systems, the population living there, the climate, all kind of different things. But what I wanted to focus on is this little graphic here that we created for each of the different categories. And here we're looking at the population statistics for Hamburg in this example. So the green line being Hamburg. And the center point always represents 0, meaning the lowest of the compared values, while the outer ring represents 100%, meaning this little pike you see there for population, that's Berlin with its 3.5 million inhabitants, or by now even 4 million or more. And this represents 100%, and the other values are calculated back from there. And those different corners represent the population, the foreigners, the unemployed people, the pupils, the students, and their spending power. And it was interesting, while I put those information that I gathered before and just had in giant Excel sheets and PDFs and put it into this visualization, you could very quickly see similarities. And for cities like Dortmund and Essen, it didn't come as a surprise because those cities are geographically close to one another and have a similar structure of inhabitants. But for Frankfurt and Stuttgart, for example, it was actually really surprising to see. And just by putting that into this visualization, it was much easier to find something like this. Looking at the bare numbers, you would not be able to do that. And this is just a good example of how information design can help you find this additional informational value. But infographics are nice, but the next logical step is adding this extra layer of interactivity on top of infographics, because this is when it gets really interesting, when you are, as a user, are able to play around with this data and explore it and have interactivity. And we did this a while ago while we had an intern working with us, a development intern, who just put this together quickly. And this is the same graphic we saw before, but now it's interactive. So meaning you could drag and drop the different categories into the corners, could put in bars in there and other things, and then just click the cities on the map and see how they compare. And this shows you that it's much more playful now. The user has control over the information that he's looking at. It's just adding way more than just the static print infographic that you'd be looking at. So what I'm trying to get at is that information design is often understood as infographics, but I think that's completely wrong. Infographics now, or info design nowadays, to me, just is a way of thinking. It means a way to approach a problem. And this also means that creatives, and creatives not being only designers, like all kind of people working on digital products can be creatives, developers of course themselves too. But creatives are not visual artists. Creators, in my mind, creatives are problem solvers. And I want to show a few examples of our case studies that we worked on over the years, just to tell you a little bit more about what I mean. A case study for Lufthansa that was more of a self-initiated project started off like this, looking at the status quo of the current infotainment system in Lufthansa flights. It's better by now. I actually recently been on the A350, like the new Airbus, and they have a new system there, which is much better, so it improved. But back then, this was the redesign of their current infotainment system, and it was pretty horrible. There are just like a few things here that come to mind. Looking at this row of icons there, you see that some of them are just not self-explanatory at all. You see the sun there and the lamp, which are already a little not sure which is what they do, but even better is the one next to it, which shows you this user icon. You'd think of maybe it's a profile or account or something like this. Turns out clicking that actually calls the flight attendant. It's like, oh, great. So, not a great UI. I mean, they took the flat idea a little bit too far. Like everything is too flat and all details are gone. So when I saw that, I felt like there must be a way to do that better. And I like this quote from James Murphy a lot, which is the best way to complain is to make things. So instead of just complaining how bad everything is and how all those solutions are not great, we should just go out ourselves and do it better. Try something else and like show how it's done better. And this is what we try to do, but just in a short period of time, since this was self-initiated and therefore not paid, we just throw together a concept, of course not like fully developed and ready to go to market, but just playing around with some ideas how this UI could work. Show you a short video here. And we didn't reinvent the wheel or anything. It's pretty much just taken well-known concepts from streaming platforms like Netflix or YouTube or other things like that, and put it together in a nicer way, because the only thing you mainly do in those in-flight infotainment system is browse through movies and pick the ones you want to watch. And we just trying to make that the most fluent experience as possible, just by using of some of those well-learned and known principles, and put it together in a design like this. And again, this was done within like a week or a little bit more, just like in our spare time. So I understand that there are many technical restrictions why often designs look like this, and it's easy to say I just put out a concept to do it better, but the example I was shown before with the icons not understandable, that's just, there's no technical reason for that. A similar thing we did a while ago, that's probably what our by now most famous project, which helped us a lot to just get like some reputation, was an infotainment concept we did for Tesla. And at the time being, which was in March 2015, the infotainment systems in cars looked like this. And they still do in very many cars, and it's just horrible. They look like 10 to 15 years old, maybe even older, and they behave the same way. It's very confusing. I very rarely found a car that just is intuitive. And the future, at least at that point, doesn't look so bright either. It's just like, it looks like Tron. And I don't know why car companies think this is the future, but apparently they do. It's getting better. It's definitely getting better. I'll show you some examples later of like where we're heading now. But 2015, this is how the future was envisioned by many of those car companies. And we thought that we could just take a different approach to it, and took the Tesla infotainment system as our groundwork, because they had this gigantic 17-inch screen, which is like a nice foundation to work off on. And developed, again, in just our spare time, a few weeks of time, the idea for a modular system of different widgets that are resizable and reconfigurable on your home screen. And you can change the size of the different widgets, place them in the way you like them, save it, store it, create different kind of screens. But more importantly, the screen is supposed to behave depending on the driving situation. Meaning, if your car is stopping on a red light or parking or anything, it makes sense that you have access to all kind of information, even like a web browser potentially, or your phone or other things. While you're driving, though, it makes more sense that your focus is on the things that you actually need while you're driving, like the navigation system, your consumption, and maybe your music player, because you might be interacting with this as well. But then if you come to a critical point in the navigation, it also makes sense that then the navigation tool takes over for this part, and you have a clear focus on this part until you do the critical turn, and then it can go back to normal. Another thing that we played around with was the idea of multi-touch gestures. So for example, down here for the temperature control, instead of having to hit the button right there at this point, which is hard in a moving vehicle, you could just slide with 2 fingers anywhere in that area to change the temperature. Same thing is true for volume. Wherever you are on the screen, just touch it with 2 fingers, slide up and down, and that changes the volume. So all of those were just like thoughts and ideas. And what it really did, fortunately for us, it just created a huge buzz around it. There were many big blogs and magazines writing about this concept, and it was great for us. There was also a lot of people who were like really complaining about it and it had many flaws, and I don't disagree with all of them. There are definitely a lot of things that were not on point yet, like typefaces were too small, maybe too much elements moving on the screen and so on. So it was far from being a production-ready design, that's for sure. But what it did was it showed us that there's definitely a need in the industry to talk about this topic, that people are actually interested in it, and they wanted something that feels like their iPhone, not like their DVD player. And this is more how it feels currently in many cars. So that was great for us, of course, as well, because there was a lot of PR. And Tesla actually reached out to us after 8 hours or so, after we published the story. And they were like, hey, this is interesting. Do you guys want to talk? We're like, yes, please. So I flew to Palo Alto and met with Tesla there. Unfortunately, it turned out like very quickly that they only want to work with people full-time in-house, which is nothing that we wanted to do. Totally understandable, though, that they'd rather want to have something important like this in-house. But it shows you that they understood, that they have the understanding that they were in the need to improve their system. And I feel like many other car companies are not there yet. But again, I'll show something about that later. But what it did, other than just connecting us to Tesla, was connecting us to the automotive industry. This is a project we did for Volkswagen, not in-car related, but for the supplying and buying department of Volkswagen. We worked with them on a bigger project for this concept here. We worked with Byton, which is a new electric car company, kind of a startup, although with a lot of German managers and Chinese money, like most of those electric car companies now. And we just worked on their app, which was fun, but it's more of like a marketing communication tool. What we'd rather want to do is work on this. They have a gigantic screen in the middle of their car, like pretty much the whole dashboard is one screen. But this is their design, so what they're currently doing in-house. And I want to show this little video that they posted on their website. And it's, you'll see. So they have this interesting shape in the middle that you could turn around with gestures and then pick things, move them around on a timeline, drop it on the map. That all looks interesting and fancy, but for no particular reason, it's designed like this. I don't think that while you're driving, you want to interact with this. And this shape in the middle in particular is just eye candy. There's no real use for that. It's just there because apparently someone thought it might look interesting and it sells well or whatever. But it's not really helping the user to interact better with the car. So we also worked on a hello? There we are. Worked on a similar concept to the one we did for Tesla for them that was connected to your phone and all based on a map and things surrounding that. That was just a short exercise, and we talked about them doing it, but they already had their internal team and they rather wanted to do like polygon shapes. So, okay, they'll do that. But it's a little frustrating. It shows you how many of those people in the car industry still think. So those are actually examples from right now. The upper one there is Volvo. This is BMW, and this is Mercedes. The BMW example is great. I mean, they actually just improved that in their newest models, but this is the current BMW 5 Series. And you see those rings there. Those are actually physical rings on top of a screen. So there is a digital screen now, but they have physical rings somehow on top of the screen. Why? Because then there are still those gauges, apparently, but why do I need those gauges? If I have a display, I can do whatever I want. Why have to put old school gauges in there? Same here with Volvo. use the screen there to have a map in the middle of the two gauges, but still show those two gauges gigantically big, and you can't interact with it. You can't make them smaller or make them go away or whatever. They have to be there all the time. And especially with the ref meter here, why do I need that? In most cars, you have automatic transmission by now, and you're not shifting, so a ref meter is just not needed anymore. But it takes up 33% of the screen for no particular reason. Mercedes just released their M-Box system, which is, they make a lot of buzz around it, but it's still using some very old school elements, and they're still trying to visually rebuild how a dashboard looks in real life. Like, why do that if I have a screen and can start from scratch? Tesla, in the meantime, learned from their mistakes and are moving on. Exactly 1 week ago, I had the chance to drive in a Model 3 in San Francisco, so I took those photos and videos myself, and it was actually pretty impressive to see how fast they're moving and how much their UI improved. So here you see the middle console, and you have, this is pretty much your dashboard. You don't have such traditional gauges anymore. You just have a big digital number for your speed, which is needed. But more importantly, or more interesting, you have your car in the middle there, and you see that in the video here, that it shows you all the cars surrounding you. So all what the sensors are seeing, it's displayed on the video as well. So if there are more than one car ahead of you, it's showing you there's one on the right, and there are two in front of you. And it was just very impressive because it gives you trust in the system. Just like visualizing it like this, you understand, oh, this is what the sensors are seeing, and apparently it's working. And this is just very helpful. And also it's a clean UI. The map takes over most of the screen if you need it. You can also bring in other elements like the music player and so on. Here's another video of showing you how it changes depending on the driving situation. So we're coming closer to this car ahead of us, and now the view on the display changes from the surroundings to just the top view of my car, and it shows me if I'm getting closer to things. And this is just very subtle details that are just very helpful. Another tiny thing I unfortunately didn't take a video of was I changed the position of my seat while I was driving, just made the seat a little more upright, and there was a little pop-up at the top coming up telling me or asking me if I wanted to save that for my user profile as a new setting for my seat. It's just like a simple thing like this is very helpful, very tiny detail, but it shows you that they're apparently thinking about the right things. We had a request from QT, which is building the software behind those infotainment systems, to build a demo for their CES. And we also take a look at the gauge there, or this cluster in front of the driver. And so we took a similar approach than Tesla did with visualizing the speed like this. Instead of a gauge, you have like one big bar that's coming up. And we also have kind of like a more advanced fuel consumption, although it's not fuel anymore, it's electricity, but a consumption display there, showing you, for example, if you type something into your navigation system that you want to go somewhere where you don't have enough energy, it's just telling you that. It's telling you, hey, you have energy for 200 miles, your destination is 250 miles away, therefore you won't make it, so let us plan in a stop for you, and here's your charging station where you should go. This is the speedometer showing you always what the limit is, showing you how far away from you are from the speed limit, and turns red if you over a certain threshold, just small details like this. We also worked on the main cluster there in the middle of the screen. That was based on the Tesla concept. That was their request. But that was a fun exercise, still a concept though, but in this time for a client that actually paid for it. So that was good for us again. But the great thing is what you see about all of this is that UI, UX designers are more and more becoming product engineers. They're not just there to beautify things. They're actually helping to develop digital products. And in the case of the cars, it's not only digital products. Actually, it's a real product you're moving with. It's just a way to interact with this product. We're also like product invaders by now, and product managers to some degree, and entrepreneurs very often. So very often you have developers and designers now creating new companies, and this is a great thing, and I can only encourage people to do that because we have most of the tools in our hands to start new companies and build digital products. And the first time we did something like it, like creating our own project, was Nexter. It was just a small app that we developed a while ago, like 2012 actually. that was the status quo back then in the App Store for public transportation system apps. There were just those three pretty much available, and they were all very list-driven, very boring, not very useful at all. And again, this quote comes to mind that the best way to complain is to make things instead of just complaining that those solutions are not great. We thought, hey, let's just try to build something on our own that will help me or us to navigate public transportation better. And we came up with this idea for an app that is based on your current position usually and shows you bus stops and things around you. Nowadays this sounds like ridiculous because Google Maps is doing that all. Back then Google Maps was not available, at least for public transportation here in Germany. So at the time being, it's actually kind of a unique idea on how to navigate with this. And we also had a second iteration of this, so mainly it was helping you to find the nearest bus stops and train stops around you and find the fastest way to your destination, but all in a very, very visual approach, less list-driven as the other apps you saw before. And we were actually surprised by the success. At the first week, we had over 10,000 downloads, and we were selling it for 99 cents in the store, which turns out not to be the best business model, but we didn't know that back then. And our intent was never to really earn money with it. It was more like, hey, we just try it out and throw it out there and see what happens. So that was great, but it doesn't really pay the bill, especially when you look at the numbers in total, they're definitely going down. So we're just 40,000 downloads in total or so after 4 years, 5 years, I don't know, which was cool, but still hard to make a living off. And launching your own product is almost like having a baby. It's a little bit, you put it out there and it's there, and then you have to worry about it, and you will always be overwhelmed. Usually you're not prepared for what is coming. We were not prepared for all the love and hate we were getting. There were so many people sending us emails and complaining about that the bus at the next stop was not there when the app told them to. It was 5 minutes late, and we're like, yeah, sorry, that's not our fault. But apparently people were complaining about this and wanted their 99 cents back. So we're like, okay, then we'll give you the 99 cents back. But it's so. What is unique to this is that usually as a designer at least, or as a developer I guess as well, you often have a client between yourself and the consumer who actually uses your product. If you launch your own product, all of a sudden there is nothing filtering this feedback in between. So you're in direct contact with your consumer or with the user itself, which is great, but it's also challenging because of all the things I mentioned before. So, but for us, we were in this place that we didn't have a real development team, we didn't have a real customer support, we didn't have a real business model. This is the biggest problem, and therefore no reasonable cost to continue. And so we decided to stop it. It's still in the App Store, and people are apparently still using it, but it's not really running anymore. But the good thing is we learned a lot, and we thought, this is great. We should do it better the next time. And the next time already is here. A completely different case though, but still our own product that we launched. And same starting point, the solutions that were out there we were not satisfied with. This is going more towards sports betting, sports gambling, which I know is a completely different industry, but it's more, this is probably something some people might know. Often during the World Cup, people play, bet on all the different outcomes of games and throw some money in the pot, and in the end the winner wins a certain percentage of it. This is the market leader for this, and it looks, as you can see, horrible. And it interacts the same way. It's just very hard to navigate. The other spectrum is like actual sports gambling companies like Tipico and bwin and so on. Those are also very list-driven and confusing, and then there are those weird places where people go in to play. Never been in one, I actually don't want to go, but apparently people still do it. Anyways, we thought there might be a sweet spot in between those two, like having a more gamification version of all of this and making it actually fun to play with friends betting on sports games. And the original idea was like you have two people playing against each other, they throw 5 buckets in the pot, and the winner takes like a little bit, and there are 50 cents going into the company, just like a small fee. Turns out this is illegal gambling. Shit. So yeah, at this point I was like, okay, if we can't make it work like this as a business model, then why should we do it at all? Because then I don't want to end up like with Nexter, where we're at this point where it's just not earning any money, it's just costing money, and we spend a lot of time doing it but don't get anywhere. But the thing is, the legal situation is like very complicated. It's like a gray zone, and nobody really understands it. So we were facing ourselves like, should we do it or should we not do it? And the decision was yes, but if we do it, then do it all or nothing, not just as a small side project. Then we actually have to invest in it and build something upon it. And this is what we did, because I talked to a bunch of people from this industry, and they were all really excited about the idea of approaching this from a design perspective, because apparently nobody did that at this point. So we came up with a design for a much more user-friendly, still focused on friends playing against friends, not you playing against the bank. So a more casual approach to the whole concept. And it's fairly simple. You start it off by just picking any kind of games you like, different leagues. You can pick all of them. You could pick just 5 or 3, and then predict your games. And this is also a little more fun approach. You can like move those sliders. You have little cards that you can swipe down. It's different than just typing in the number on a keyboard or so. It's just all a little bit more fun, more gamification, more animations, and a very fluent and quick experience. After you predict your scores, you just invite some of your friends, and this is where it gets really interesting. You then have a wager, and by now it's a credit currency, so it's not an actual currency, it's just a virtual currency. So we have credits, but we also have a nice way on how you can actually set this wager, just like throwing in money in the bank. Just another way to make it more fun to do it, and also potentially at some point, if this might be actual money, then get people to throw in more money than they would usually. I know I don't want anybody to get addicted into gambling, but still it shows you how UI and UX can have an impact on how someone interacts with the product. And by now, we also have the ability to play for beers and coffee and shots and stuff like this, if you don't want to play for credits or money, which you can't do at this point. But sooner or later, we might be able to actually have actual money involved. We have a partner now that we're working together with who knows this industry very well, because I don't want to deal with all the legal components of this, because it's like very complicated and very hard, but we want to stay on the completely legal path, of course. And therefore we have this partner we're dealing with, and we're evolving, and we're about to launch this version within the next month or so, because the current version is only on iOS and not very good. It was just a proof of concept to talk to investors and partners. But if any of you want to help us, I know there are probably some developers in here. We're currently looking for developers to help out and potentially even build a new team here. Currently working with a team in Hungary, but we might want to build another team here to actually build it. And so feel free to reach out and shoot me a mail if you're interested to help us on this. But the great news is that it's not only self-initiated projects and concepts where UI UX design is now playing a big role. It's a lot of bigger companies understanding the importance of it, and developers and designers are getting more recognition and working more in management positions and have the power to control products, digital products. So creators are heavily involved in designing and developing this products. And just a quick study I want to show is Whoop. It's a fitness tracker professional athletes. At least that was the idea when it started. So you can see this is the first prototype. Not very good looking, also not that easy to wear. And this was the sketch from the CEO, also very beautiful. But by now it looks like this. I'm actually wearing one right here. It's a heart rate monitoring system, and it's tracking a bunch of health data, and it's focused on professional athletes and serious athletes. So it's not another Fitbit that just tracks your step. It's actually helping you to perform at your highest level. And we've started working with them when there were 3 people. It started out of Boston, out of Harvard, and I was pretty much the 4th person on the team helping them to develop this product. When we started, it was just this idea for this whole platform and product. But by now, they have a beautiful office in downtown Boston. No, not in downtown, in Fenway, Boston, overlooking downtown, and have like 60, 70 people working there, have a total of 50 million funding by now. And we've been there for the whole journey of creating this product. And by now, we have this huge web platform and app that we built from ground up, and have this whole system now that works across all devices. And we have a bunch of very great professional athletes using it. People like LeBron James or Michael Phelps, Shaquille O'Neal, other people are using it. And it's great to see that those people interact with the design that we built just kind of out of thin air. It's just like this tiny idea that turned into a product that people are actually using and liking. And I tell you a little bit about how it works. It's just mainly those three pillars, which is strain, recovery, and sleep. Strain is like how intense your day is, how much strain you put on your body. Sleep is, you have a certain sleep need for each night, and depending on how much sleep you get, you have a sleep performance like of the percentage of how much sleep you needed you actually got. And the focus is on recovery though. It's how well your body is prepared to take on strain, because that's the problem with many serious athletes. They put on too much strain on their body, which leads to overtraining, which leads to injuries, which is a big problem for those serious athletes. And this recovery score is defined by certain metrics like HRV, which is the heart rate variability, resting heart rate, sleep data, and other things. And you can really see that it works when you go out for a night of drinking. So tomorrow might look like this, because you have your resting heart rate really goes up to 80, your HRV goes down to 30 or even worse, which might not mean something to you by now, but 80 resting heart rate is a lot, and that happens when you drink. And it showed us that there's also a platform for the coach. To skip that, there's a sleep coach telling you when you should go to bed every night. And there's also a user journey where you can answer questions like, did you drink alcohol, for example, or did you take any medicine, or how do you feel, and so on. And we did a survey with a bunch of Harvard athletes, and most of them were reporting things that were great for us to see, because it told us, or it showed us, that good UI UX can actually help to change users' behavior. And at this survey, we found out that of the athletes we were working with at day 129, that in average they spend an additional 41 minutes in bed, which is huge, like 41 more minutes spending in bed, because they understood that the only way to improve their recovery is just by sleeping more. And the only way to sleep more is to go to bed more early or sleep longer. It's as simple as that. And same is true for caffeinated beverage, 68% less often, consuming alcohol, 79% less often. Might not be true for me or other people, but we're not professional athletes, so that's fine. Screen device, 20% less often. And by now we see that it's also other people than only professional athletes using it, like surgeons, for example, are using it because they know they have to perform at a high level, and whenever they're when they're in the ER, they have to be 100% recovered, 100% prepared. So they use the Whoop system as well to get the most out of their body and prepare for it. And by now Whoop is doing really well. They got like a lot of buzz around it. They have professional athletes in all 4 big American sports league. They have a partnership with the NFL Players Association, where the players can actually sell the data they're gathering, sell it to like broadcasters or other companies, and share the outcome with Whoop and other big companies talking about it. And it's been a great journey for us so far to see how a product can start from this little idea to this product that is used throughout the world by now. And we had a part in this, and I think this is where it's heading towards, that more and more companies involve designers early on and understand that it's important to build digital products. And we currently do that with a variety of very interesting clients. Wunder is actually a startup here out of Hamburg who are building a carpool system that is really exciting, and we've been working with them for some time now. And this is getting bigger and bigger as well, and just started working with an LA-based client on an anti-fake news website, which is also very promising and very interesting to work on. Also working on a big blockchain project right now, which might be a technology that eventually changes the internet for good. And so the question is, what is next? And the good news is for designers and creatives and I guess developers as well, is there are endless possibilities. There's so many industries that we haven't really touched yet. We're just scratching the surface. There can be so much done in all of those, like medicine, industrial context, where design and creative coding can have like a very deep impact to bring this to the next level. And I think we will see that happen over the next few years. And with this bright look into the future, I'd like to come to an end with like 8 minutes over time and say thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much. Questions? I'm happy to give you the microphone and let you talk to the audience.
Hey, wait, pretty loud. Thanks for your talk, really great, thank you. Can you talk a little bit about your design workflow in general? Do you spend a lot of time wireframing or on paper, or how do you approach a project?
Actually, we often don't split it into two things that often. We usually see UI UX as one integral thing. So yeah, we start off by simpler designs, but we often put the visual effort into it quite early. So we, because especially if you work on complex information design, you can't just work on simple UX wireframes because color plays a big role and other things as well. So it's for us, it's often the back and forth between the two disciplines. And by now, thanks to many of the great tools that are available now, like Sketch and InVision and all of those, it becomes so easy to design very fast that we don't often have to take this detour through simple wireframes and jump into the actual design very fast. This doesn't mean that we don't sketch things in the beginning and just have rough ideas first and do some research and write things down. But then when it comes to actual design, we often jump straight into Sketch and build actual designs, but not on the full-blown level, but still on a, let's say, a very high fidelity wireframe level.
More questions?
Hey, how do you actually communicate with a software developer who then implements your design? Do you just show them your sketches and then it's the job of him to implement it, or how do you make sure that it's that the end product is good?
Yeah, it's tricky. It depends. We do have a developer in-house. That's definitely the easiest way to do it because you have like very short communication. You could just like sit side by side and look into the designs. What we usually do, because we often have developers sitting on the client side, is that we upload files in InVision and have the sketch file for them ready. And if they need assets, we provide them as well. But in our experience, most developers like to do that themselves, and most of them, the people we work with, are very familiar and liking Sketch a lot. So, but we still create bigger files where you see the flow of the app, where we leave comments, where they can leave comments and ask questions. We often use InVision for that. So we have this one channel where we can communicate. But still, it comes often down to just like face-to-face communication and even jumping on a call if they're not in the same city or same room, and discuss things. And then, of course, when they come up with the first iteration, the first development version, then we do it the other way around. We give feedback and let them know this is 30 pixels off, this is whatever, and provide it like this. I think we could still do a better job there because you could lay out the files in a better way, like have a better library available. But it's often a very fluent process. Like even the design is not set in stone. It's often changing. It's an ongoing process, and therefore we like to just play it by ear and put out the open files for them and update them whenever it's needed, and try to communicate as much and frequently as often using all different channels like Slack, InVision, telephone, Skype, or face-to-face, ideally.